Well, hey everyone, welcome to Impact. My name is Zach, and I'm so excited to start our new series called More Than a Hashtag. I almost said hashtag more than a hashtag. That'd have been confusing. But it's called More Than a Hashtag. And now one of my favorite hashtags is the hashtag First World Problems. If you're unfamiliar with this, it's basically describing the simple complaints, the simple struggles that you and I go through on a daily basis and how we complain so much about them. But in comparison to what a lot of other people are dealing with, or what a lot of the world is dealing with, like these real problems, it's kind of minuscule, kind of simple, kind of small. But I find them really funny because my friends in high school used to give each other a hard time whenever we complain about something simple. Like some of the things we used to say were, "Oh my goodness, the outlet is way too far from the couch to plug in my phone that's dying." Or, "Oh, I'm so hungry, but I don't want to go all the way to the kitchen. It's too far away." We had one where we went out to eat one time and my buddy was complaining about how he's like, "Oh, they only gave me 2 ketchup packets for my entire meal." Which I get is tough, those things are small, but also hashtag first world problems. You got something like, you go to the movie theater and all the seats are full besides for the front row, and it's like, oh, now I have to watch this giant movie looking up and my neck's gonna get sore. Oh man. Or you go to Valley Fair and you wait 15 minutes in line to go on the roller coaster, and it's like, was it even worth it? That 15 minutes of my life I'll never get back. It was brutal. Thanksgiving's coming up, and a very real problem is eating too much and then feeling tired. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have had that extra turkey leg because I am so tired now. I just need to take a nap. It's going to take some time for me to recover from this. This was tough on me. I do it to myself every year. But these simple things that you and I complain about, and I'm sure there's a number of them that you've maybe done, that your friends, your family have said, and you could throw some of those in the comments, but I decided to go online and grab some, and Twitter did not let me down on some of the simple things that people complain about that I would consider hashtag first world problems. You got Dave here. Dave says, "I just had a cup of tea with soy milk. It was one of the worst decisions I've ever made in my life." Dave, if that's one of the worst decisions you've made in your life, you've made some really great decisions, and you don't make bad decisions like ever. If that's one of the worst, just props to you, Dave. Well done. You got Duncan here. "My pool cover won't open properly. What a drag." Man, that's tough, Duncan. I wish I just had a pool. That would be fun. That'd be really fun. You got Steve here, and this is a very real problem. Steve says, "Had to turn the brightness down on my iPad because it hurt my eyes." Steve, I get that. You wake up in the morning, you turn your phone on, and that brightness was turned all the way up, and it's blinding when it comes on. That's tough, Steve. I get that. You got Zoe here. Says, "I had to wake up for my ironing lady to come and collect our clothes. She still isn't here." That's tough, Zoe. I don't have anyone doing my laundry, but if I did and they weren't here like right when they said they'd be, I would throw a fit. Like that. That's tough. That's really tough. But there's none tougher than Michelle right here. Michelle was in line for salad for 15 minutes to find out they had no egg or, wait for it, giant couscous. To say this has ruined my Monday is an understatement. And Michelle, I get you. If I don't get my giant couscous, that usually ruins my entire week. So the fact that it only ruined your Monday, you are strong. That is incredible. Well done. Awesome job. But these hashtag first world problems, it's something so silly, so funny, and yet we tend to complain about these different things when there's all these real problems. Not that that's not a problem, not getting your couscous, but there's all these other problems that seem to be a little more significant. And that's really what this series is all about. This More Than a Hashtag series wants to dive in to talking about the injustices that are in our world. These real difficulties, these real struggles that people are dealing with. And we want to talk about how God would respond to them, and how do you and I handle it in a way that's biblical. We talk about all the time how we want to love God, love others. And so how do we do that when it comes to the injustices in our world? And so I figured we should probably define justice and what it means. I want to give you just a simple definition for justice. It's making wrong things right. Making wrong things right. I want to leave it as simple as that, because if I try and make it too complicated, I think it's going to be intimidating in what's already a tough subject to talk about. But that's justice, making wrong things right. And when I think about what I see on social media, what I read about on the internet, what you hear about on the news, or even just from other people, and you see the hashtags of people trying to wear awareness, trying to bring awareness. You see things like hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag All Lives Matter, hashtag Justice for you fill in the name, hashtag Women's Rights, hashtag Free the Children, hashtag, and it just goes on and on. There's this uproar, it's an outcry for justice in our world today. People are crying out for it, they're standing up for it, they're fighting for it. And literally here in Minnesota, it's happening in our own backyard. Like, these injustices aren't happening across the ocean. They're happening in our country, in our state, in our community, guys. And I know when it comes to this kind of stuff, it can often lead to a lot of uncomfortable situations, uncomfortable conversations, difficult conversations. But I think that's why it's so important for you and I to even be talking about it. Because if you and I claim to follow Jesus, and we want to love God and love others, but we sit on the sidelines when it comes to these huge issues for people, these huge issues, I don't think we're doing God or our faith justice. Because what I read in the Bible, and the God that I read about in the Bible, the Jesus I see in it, is one that stands up for those who are hurting, that stands up for those who are oppressed, that seeks justice for all. And so that's what this series is all about. How do we step into the justice, into the injustice, in a way that we're able to love God, love others? How do we reflect Jesus in these different situations? And so first off, I want to start off with the verse that's crucial to keep in our mind all the time, but especially when we're talking about justice and injustice in the world, because it can become such a divisive, a dividing thing to talk about. And so Ephesians 2:10, you got to keep this, write this down, make a note, highlight it in your Bible, highlight it on your phone, whatever you got to do. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's masterpieces. He's created us new in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago." This verse says that we are God's masterpiece. Like, how does that make you feel? How does that change the way you see yourself when you hear the creator of the universe calls you His masterpiece? When you think He created the oceans and the sunsets and the sunrise and animals, and yet He's like, you are my masterpiece. Like, how does that change the way you see yourself? And just as importantly, how does it change the way you see others around you? Because this verse isn't just saying Zach is a masterpiece. It's not even just saying you are a masterpiece. It's saying all of us were created as God's masterpieces. All of us were beautifully and wonderfully created, as the Bible says, that we're made in the image of God. How does that change the way you see the people around you? Because when we forget this, that your neighbor, that classmate, that coworker is made in the image of God, when we forget that, it starts to divide. We start to look down on our neighbor. We start to think that those who don't agree with us are basically monsters. It's like, oh my gosh, why do you think that? How can you think that? How can you say or live like that? And we start to ignore them. We start to tune out those people who don't see the world the same way we do. When we start to put ourselves on a pedestal and we're like, yeah, I was created in the image of God, but you've got kind of a lot of flaws. You don't see the world right. Like, if you saw it the way I saw it, everything would be better. And when we start to do that, that's not bringing the love of God and the love of others into injustice. That's just us coming in and slapping a Bible over people's heads, or our own selfish like desires, our own selfish things that we're trying to do for our own gain. That's not going to help anything. And so we need to remember, as we step into these conversations, into these uncomfortable situations, that the other person that we're talking about, the other person that we're talking with, is a masterpiece, made in the image of God, beautifully and wonderfully created and loved unconditionally. And so as we continue looking at that verse too, the second half says, we're God's masterpieces, created new to do the good things that God planned for us long ago. And I think part of those good things is stepping into the injustice in the world, to fighting for those who are oppressed, to fighting for those who are at a disadvantage. There's a prophet, I want to bring you into a Bible story. There's a prophet in the Bible named Micah. And a prophet, in case you don't know, is someone who basically hears from God and then shares it with everyone else. And so Micah is the chosen prophet. God tells him to step into a lot of these unjust situations, because at the time there's a lot of these terrible rulers that are just in it for them. It's like all about me, what I can gain, more wealth, more fame, more status. I don't care if I have to step on, I don't care if I have to kill people, is what's happening in these verses, so that I can get ahead. And so God calls Micah to step into this injustice, to be the voice for those who are being oppressed, to help rally God's people to come together and fight against what's going on in the world that they're living in. And we read this in Micah 6:8, and this is going to be our main verse for this series, and it says this: "And what does the Lord require of you?" If you've ever wondered, if you're like, God, what do you even want from me? Right here, here's an answer for that. Lord, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. These three things. This is what we're going to be focusing on over the next couple weeks. Like, this is our focus. This is what we're trying to figure out when it comes to stepping into injustice, is how do we actually act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly? Because all three of them are going to be key if we truly want to begin living for justice, to begin making those wrong things right. And so the question I have for you, what are ways that you can start to make a difference? What are ways you can start having conversations that you can step into those sometimes uncomfortable situations, to start standing up for the injustices in the world? And maybe nothing's popping in your head right now, but I guarantee you there's things that you can do. And so over the next couple weeks, we'll get a little more specific about different things that you can engage in and step into. But as you look at this, it can be intimidating. Honestly, as I'm thinking about this, and as you look around our world today, it's intimidating seeing everything that's going on. It's like, where do we even start? And so I want to remind you two things as we step into this series, as we step into this idea of trying to be people who love God, love others, even in crazy, chaotic situations. Two things I want you to remember. The first is that God is the miracle worker, not us. God is the miracle worker, not us. And what's so important about this is it's not all on our shoulders. Like, God's the one that's going to do miracles with us. He wants to work with us, which is the amazing part. But He's the one that's going to do the miracles. He's just asking us to step forward and say, let's do this. He just wants you to come alongside with Him. So that's the first thing to remember. The second thing to remember is you don't have to do everything, just something. If you try and take on everything, you're going to get burned out. You're not even probably going to make a big difference. You might make some little differences here and there, but if you truly want to make a difference, God's like, just do something. Focus in. Like, God's given you passions. He's given you gifts and abilities and skills. Impact's main verse, 1 Peter 4:10. Each of us has received a gift from God. And we're supposed to use that as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. It's various, like it can go in different places because we all have these different gifts. God's like, you don't have to do everything, but do something. The passion I've put inside of you, do something. And I want to end with this verse, 1 Timothy 4:12. It says, don't let anyone think less of you because you are young, but be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, in your faith, and in your purity. God's like, be an example. Like, just because you guys might not even be able to vote yet doesn't mean you can't make a difference in your school. Just because you can't run for president doesn't mean you can't make a difference in your community. God's like, be an example to all believers in the way that you live, in the way you love, in the way you do life. God's like, do something. And so I know it's a lot, it's vague for you guys right now, but like I said, these next couple weeks we'll get more specific, but I just wanted to remind you guys, as you walk into this next week, don't put yourself on a pedestal. Remember, everyone is made in the image of God. We are all God's masterpiece. Remember that, because that's going to help unify us instead of dividing us. And let's go and love God and love others as we step in to some uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable conversations. Thanks, guys, for checking us out. We hope to see you back next week. Until then, though, we'll see you later.